cut to the chase, Deltarune is the prequel to Undertale, just not in the way you think it is. Internet, welcome to Game Theory, where if Sans is Ness, then you know Lancer is gonna be Lucas. I mean, the hair is a perfect match and the letters in both names are identical, provided you swap out two add one and mix them all up. Theory confirmed. And now that we've definitely proven that connection beyond a shadow of a doubt, a few quick announcements. First, let's figure out what's really going on in this game. In case you missed it, Deltarune came out of nowhere. One day, the Undertale Twitter account just started randomly going off about new futures and connections, and then all of a sudden, here's a link to a sketch-tastic website that totally doesn't look like it's a virus waiting to happen. But after malware checking the file twice, you load it up and lo and behold, it's all our favorite faces from 3 years ago. Alphys, Toriel, Asgore, Undyne, all on the surface. It's gotta be a continuation of Undertale, right? Well, not quite. You see, it quickly becomes apparent there's something more than a sequel here. No one knows each other. Undyne has never heard of Alphys and has both her eyes. Asgore isn't a king, he's the owner of a flower shop. Asriel isn't some twisted demigod out for revenge, but rather your brother, who's away at college. And there's no talk of surfaces and underworlds, but rather darkners and lighteners. It's like Undertale, but not quite. Everything is just a little mixed up. Just like the letters in the name, Deltarune is an anagram of Undertale. In short, it is all the same pieces, but they're all rearranged. So what's it all mean? Well, with only Chapter 1 released of a game that, according to Toby Fox, may take up to 999 years to complete, we should probably try to figure out what the complete story of Deltarune is going to be all about, since if we don't solve it now, who knows if any of us will live to the day that it's released. And once we have a grasp on what's really happening in this struggle between lighteners and darkners, how does it connect to Undertale? Does it connect to Undertale at all? So working alongside Reddit user Win on the Game Theorist subreddit, I think the two of us have figured this thing out. Top to bottom, up, down, and sideways. Fun fact, by the way, Win isn't just an advanced theorist that I found on the Game Theorist subreddit, he's also the creator of Trollface. Yeah, the Trollface. So over the last couple weeks, I have been in the presence of the OG meme lord. It's pretty fascinating, actually. The internet is a surprisingly small place. Anyway, I digress. Today, we start to solve Deltarune, with an interpretation that I predict will be pretty controversial. But have no fear, I plan to solve it a second, and likely less controversial way in a follow-up theory in just a few days. So 2, maybe even 3 theories for just this one chapter. I mean, we gotta milk this thing. Like I said, it's gonna take 999 years for it to come out, so we should probably just enjoy theorizing about it now, since it might go away and we'll never see it again. The first thing we need to address is how this game deals with the element of choice, or more accurately, disregards the element of choice. Immediately upon starting up the game, Deltarune catches players off guard by having them create a character, imbue them with seemingly symbolic personality traits, and then immediately throw it all away, saying no one can choose who they are in this world. This theme of non-choice continues everywhere. In the classroom, you can't choose your project partner, you're just assigned the class bully Susie. You can't choose your dialogue options out in the hallway with Susie, with her outright telling you your choices don't matter. Then, once you two enter the dark world, Susie tells you to lead the way, and then immediately takes over. Your choice is removed. Later on in Chapter 1, you try to direct Susie in the prison hallways, and she just outright ignores you, even in battles. I mean, sure, there's a violent and non-violent way to end every confrontation in the game, but no one actually dies. They just run away. And sure, the dialogue for the ending changes slightly, but the evil king still survives, and you still get back home to rip out your heart and show off your cutlery. Chris is Yuri confirmed. Now, this all could be a theme of the game, and probably is to a certain extent, that in life you do actually have to sometimes fight battles. I mean, even if you don't fight the king at the end of the chapter, the conversation about having to fight him still happens. But I don't really believe that's the only reason all this is in there. I think Toby Fox included this theme so strongly in Chapter 1 to set up the audience expectations for what Deltarune is. A normal game. It's a normal game. Remember, Toby Fox is coming off of Undertale, a game that was revolutionary in its gameplay, one that reinvented the way we see RPGs and violence in video games, and one that was built on the principle that every decision would affect the outcome in some way. Any project that Toby did next would have to contend with audience expectation carried over from Undertale. And by telling people out of the gates that, hey, this is a very different gameplay experience than the choice-based systems of Undertale, it helps set audience expectations accordingly. And you don't just have to take my assumptions for it. On TwitLonger, Toby did a Q&A with himself where he addressed some of the major questions he predicted people would have about Deltarune, in the typically vague way that game developers talk about their games these days. Here's a bunch of quotes from that Q&A. Will there be multiple endings? No. No matter what you do, the ending will be the same. Honestly, most games are like that, but for some reason it feels really oppressive to say here. I think that's part of the reason why the act fight system feels so vestigial in this one, but I wanted to do it anyway because it's cool. By the way, I was really worried at first about making this. The expectations for my next work would be really high. So high that I knew that no matter what I did, I felt like people would be underwhelmed. If you played Undertale, I don't think I can make anything that makes you feel that way again. However, it's possible I can make something else. End quotes. So it feels clear, based on his own words, that while you can beat the game with a pacifist or aggressive strategy, we can't really say genocide since again, no one is truly dying, it's more because it's a cool gameplay style rather than something that's integral to the story he's looking to tell. So with that out of the way, let's get into the meat of this thing. In that same interview, Toby Fox asked and answered this question. Is this a sequel? What's going on? I'm worried if people worry too much about what it is, they might not be able to properly enjoy it. I will say that basically what you're seeing here is not the world of Undertale. To rephrase that, Deltarune's world is a different one, with different characters that have lived different lives. A whole new story will happen. With this information out in the world, it got people immediately thinking about alternate universes, and some connection to the Gaster experimentation, but I'm not sure that's quite the right angle to go here. You see, Deltarune immediately lays its cards on the table, pun not intended. Okay, so maybe slightly intended, by revealing at the end of Chapter 1 that the main plot that we just played through was all an imaginary game. It's Alice in Wonderland, it's Dorothy in Oz, or in this case, it's Susie and Chris in an abandoned classroom filled with toys. The Darkner world, with the Mad King and his son Lancer, isn't a real place. It's an imaginary game land populated by a deck of cards, an old stuffed cat, puzzle pieces, checkers getting kinged. The game hits us over the head with this revelation like a squeaky toy mallet. Oh wait, that's also a character in the Darkner world. But for further proof of the it's all imaginary angle, just look at Chris's weapon descriptions. Chris's wood sword is described as a wooden blade with a carbon reinforced core. But if you check your inventory after returning to your hometown, suddenly you're holding a pencil, wood with carbon in the middle. The same is true with Chris's spooky sword. If that's what you have equipped when you end your journey and hop into the Dark Fountain, Chris is then left with a Halloween pencil in the real world. For even more proof, Chris's ball of accumulated junk that is also in his inventory is largely alluded to be all of the items you collected across your journey. It changes based on what's in your inventory. Attempting to throw it away will make Chris's hands shake, as though he doesn't want to give it up. Chris's internal life is clearly rich and vibrant, and he holds strong emotional attachments to it, which is why it's all the more impressive that he makes the decision to let Susie become a part of it. Susie is clearly the class bully, but she's a much deeper character than what that might imply. Throughout Chapter 1, Susie is repeatedly defined by being hungry. Shortly after being introduced, we catch her eating chalk, at which point she lashes out in anger. In the Dark World, she goes on to steal a cake, munch on Lancer's salsa, demand Ralsei bake cakes for her, and raise funds to buy chocolates from the bake sale, which puts her initial reaction to the chalk moment into a new perspective. She's angry because someone just saw how poor she is. That's why she keeps her hair long. That's why her jeans are ripped. And that's why she's so mad all the time. She is actively pushing people away from her because she's ashamed of who she is. Notice that of all the houses you can visit during the Chapter 1 epilogue, hers isn't one of them. I predict it's because the reveal of her broken home life will be saved for a future chapter. So we have ourselves the quiet, introverted Chris and the misunderstood bully Susie. Once they enter the abandoned classroom looking for chalk, Chris invites Susie into her imaginary world, acting as a dungeon master of sorts, using the items found around the room and in their pockets as items and characters and weapons. And this isn't a spur-of-the-moment adventure either. This classroom and the dark world created within it is a place where Chris has played often. It's a detail that's easy to overlook if you don't explore the rest of the school building, but we learn that Chris's mother, Toriel, is a teacher at the school, making it very possible that Chris would often play here. This was once her safe space, a place of creative freedom and happiness, a place where her and her older brother Azriel would play, at least until he left for college. Enter Ralsei, our third hero of light, and an anagram of the name Azriel. Coincidence? You know it's not. By talking to people around the town, we get a very clear picture of the Dreamer family backstory. At some point early in his life, Chris was adopted into this family, becoming the only human in a town full of monsters. Azriel, who's slightly older, is portrayed as the town's golden boy, singing in the church choir, going to dances with Caddy, picking up chicks with burger pants. The family was happy. From talking to Father Alvin at the church and the waitress at the diner, we can piece together that they used to attend church every Sunday, followed by a breakfast, at least until Toriel and Asgore got a divorce. As the waitress in the diner says, of course, things happened and then y'all stopped coming together. But every Sunday, you and your brother'd still come in. He'd order you a hot chocolate. You must really miss him. And those words couldn't be more true. In the aftermath of the family's divorce, Azriel protected Chris, served as a loving rock of stability. But then he left too. He went to college, leaving Chris absolutely alone. Remember, Chris has to be adopted, so he's been abandoned by his birth parents, abandoned by his adopted parents, and now he's abandoned by his brother. It's why, when you drink the hot chocolate, your throat gets tight. It brings back painful memories of missing him. If Susie is a bully because she's ashamed of being poor, Chris is brooding and emotionally removed from the world around her because she feels alone and betrayed. He's shut down emotionally for his own protection, and in a figurative and literal sense, he shut the door to that room where he used to play with Azriel, which is why, when it's suddenly in front of him again and he has to enter it for supplies, he's scared. That door is both literally and symbolically an entry into Chris's most private life. And this moment of him backing away is the fear of letting himself become emotionally vulnerable again, and also of letting someone else who could hurt him in again. And this isn't just speculation. Look at Ralsei. This is a character that Chris has made up as a stand-in for his brother, right? That much is pretty obvious. What isn't as obvious about this character, though, is why Chris decided to characterize his brother the way he has. Ralsei in the Dark World is young and a bit of a pushover. Chris is the leader of the group down in the Dark World, not the older brother. In fact, as Ralsei himself says, "I've been waiting alone here my whole life for you two to arrive." Ralsei has no world, no history without Chris being there. Chris has created an embodiment of his brother who is incapable of leaving him. This is someone who is dependent on Chris. And why is Ralsei so young? Well, it's probably because this is the version of him that Chris wants to remember. The one that played with him in the abandoned classroom. The one that didn't abandon him and his family by going to college. After the events of Chapter 1, there are 6 days before Azriel returns home from college. And at the end of their adventure, Susie eagerly asks to return to the Dark World adventure the following day. To me, this is setting up the chapter arc of this game, with each new chapter being a new day of this imaginary game, all leading up to the climax, the return of Azriel. With the reveal that Azriel is the Knight, the big bad of the Darkener world. Not the ideal Azriel that Chris has embodied in Ralsei, but the older, real-world Azriel coming home from college, one that runs the risk of shattering the Darkener world once and for all. Look at what we've established so far. Chris uses this game to work through her abandonment issues, especially as they regard her brother in the form of Ralsei. The biggest upheaval for her would be that the brother who returns home from college isn't the same as when he left. The fear that he is now a different person. Now look at what we know about the Knight. We're told that the Darkener world was at peace until the Knight came and corrupted the King of Spades, that he can create dark fountains, and that he's responsible for Jevil, the secret jester boss's fall to insanity insanity, and eventually him being locked up. This all lines up with Azrael's role in Chris's life. In Rhalsei's prophecy, he states that the fountains of darkness give this land form, and in a hidden, unused manual buried in the game's files, it confirms that the dark fountains give rise to Rhalsei's body. In other words, they are the things that make this imaginary world made of real-life toys come to life, meaning that they have to be tied to either Chris or Azrael, the creators of this world, the storytellers. Now look at Jevil. All his dialogue speaks to how those outside of his prison cell are the ones who are locked up, and that he is the one who's free. He admits, however, that he's lonely, and that he wishes more people to be free with him. Shalm explains that Jevil, quote, started saying bizarre things that didn't completely make sense, but didn't completely not make sense either. Eventually, Jevil started viewing the world as a game, while everyone acting in it is its participants, which we know is actually true here. So Jevil is, in my estimation, the embodiment of Chris's imagination, her childhood spirit. I mean, think about it. The Darkeners are toys who have literally been locked away when no one wanted to play with them anymore. And Jevil is literally and figuratively being kept separate from them because Chris no longer has that childish spirit to want to play with them. If Jevil is Chris's childish spirit, her imagination, then he would be free. He is the spirit of chaos and freedom and creativity and everything that childhood imagination means. And of course, he's lonely, since he's been shut to the side with no one to play with him ever since Azrael left. Until the day that Susie decides to join the game and the door gets unlocked. Even his insistence on playing a numbers game directly parallels his knowledge that this whole adventure is just a Dungeons and Dragons-esque imaginary adventure. And what was the thing that killed Chris's playful spirit in the beginning? The final thing that broke her? Azrael leaving. It killed all the joy she had, leaving her alone. She no longer wants to play, meaning that Jevil, in turn, gets locked away, kept separate from all the toys in the Darkener world. But lastly, look at the Lightener prophecy. Rhalsei tells us at the beginning of the game that the Lighteners must destroy something called the Angel's Heaven. What? Destroying heaven made by angels. Usually those are seen as good things. It seems like it would be the opposite of what you'd want to do, until you stop and think, where else have we seen an angel in this series before? Azrael's final form in Undertale. In fact, the idea of Angel's Heaven might just be the thing that unlocks the connections between Undertale and Deltarune. Are they indeed two separate universes created by Gaster, as many believe, or are the connections something more, something deeper? More on that, the Undertale-Deltarune connection, next time, since that is a whole other theory unto itself. So make sure you subscribe to see it. In fact, I challenge you to hit that subscribe bell and comment